Welcome to Samvad. This episode is from Cochin and we are in a very beautiful location in Cochin. Today we have a special guest, diplomat Sri Venu Rajamani.
Our immediate neighbor Sri Lanka is facing its worst economic and political crisis. Recently, Gotabaya Rajapakse had an unceremonious exit. The man replacing him is Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe. Ambassador Venu Rajamani had an in-depth knowledge in South Asian issues. He will speak about the Sri Lankan crisis. The biggest crisis ever in the island paradise, both the trade deficit and budget deficit. The perfect combination for a disaster. What's next for Sri Lanka?
Well, huge challenges await Sri Lanka right now. First and foremost, what they need to do is to establish a government. Right now, there is a vacuum. They need political stability. As we all know, both the President and Prime Minister were forced to step back by protesters. Ranil Wickremesinghe is temporarily interim president, but next Wednesday, the Speaker has asked for a new president to be elected by the 225-member parliament. We will have to see who will emerge as a leader in that election by the parliament. But that still is a temporary solution. Whoever is elected will, while on one hand have to manage the immediate financial crisis, also prepare for a general election in another 6 to 8 months when a new president and prime minister both are elected by the people at large. Only that will bring legitimacy to the government completely. Today, since the parliament is electing one amongst themselves, I presume that there will continue to be allegations that this was a deal stitched together by the major political parties and the major political leaders. The public protest that we have seen was a spontaneous protest targeting the entire political establishment. It reflected a loss of confidence in all political parties and all political leaders. So whatever interim arrangement comes into being will still bring an older leader back. And Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe himself has already announced that he will be in the fray. So he is the candidate of the ruling party, and if he is elected by the parliament, we might still see the protests continuing. So we have to wait and watch how the political situation will evolve. And from there, whoever comes to power will have to pick up the negotiations with the IMF and try and reach an agreement. And the IMF with the international community will have to come in and bail out Sri Lanka
Okay,
from
can we
the
expect
crisis.
a drastic policy changes from the new government?
You know, the IMF would be very clear. The IMF is a team of professionals and they are the ultimate crisis managers in the world economy. The IMF is very different from World Bank. World Bank supports countries achieve long-term development. IMF is created to deal with crises like this. Across the world at different points of time, IMF, including in India, IMF has come in to try and help countries who go into a crisis for one reason or the other. Sri Lanka itself, since 1965, has gone to IMF 13 times. So this is not the first time they are going to the IMF. So the IMF are a bunch of professionals. They will come in, they will say, this is the crisis, this much money we will bring to handle the immediate situation. But these are the steps that you need to take to achieve stability. And as you take those steps, little by little, we will keep releasing the money. We will not give you all the money and then say and leave you to do it. So we will very closely monitor and supervise how the country's economy is brought back to health. So there is every reason to be confident in the IMF as a provider of solutions and a provider of immediate financial assistance to meet the current account deficit, the foreign exchange shortage, to meet some of the debt obligations that Sri Lanka has, and to import essential commodities. But then the government has to push through these decisions.
And do they have any option other than IMF?
At this point, I don't see any other option other than IMF. Some people thought China will come in with huge amounts of money and rescue them, but that has not happened. India is the only country which has given assistance to them in the last 1 year. We have given them almost $3.8 billion of assistance. But for India, there is no other option. They are so close to us. Whatever happens there will impact upon us. More than anybody else, we want stability there. And there are people who are bound to us by close historical, cultural, civilizational ties. So India has given whatever immediate assistance it can. But the problems are too big for India to handle by itself. And China so far has shown no enthusiasm to come forward as independently. What China has said is, we will come with the rest of the international community and the IMF or other international financial institutions. So IMF is really the only solution right now available to the Sri Lankan government. Rajapakse's unpopularity is backfiring. In any country, in any society, especially in democratic countries, you cannot have an authoritarian rule. You cannot impose dynastic politics. You cannot have governments which do not listen to the people and which do not consult experts and which take decisions without adequate consideration and discussions. These were the reasons for Rajapakse's downfall. But as far as China is concerned, Rajapakse provided them an entry into Sri Lanka. Rajapakse did them any favor, as a result of which they also put money. These problems have grown over several decades, over multiple governments. There are figures which have come out. China itself has put out figures saying the debt to China is only around 10%. And the debt owed to Japan and the Asian Development Bank is much higher than the debt owed by China. So China contributed to the crisis by giving loans for projects which were probably
we were very suspicious about the role of China in Sri Lanka.
That's right. In India, there is a tendency to always see China in negative terms and to be very fearful of China. And certainly Sri Lanka is so close to us. We do not want an expansion of undue Chinese influence there. But at the same time, we cannot stop Sri Lanka from taking loans from China or taking assistance from China. So that is a relationship. To some extent we will have to live with it, but beyond that, good relations with Sri Lanka is what will ensure us that Sri Lanka doesn't go too much into China's fold or doesn't do anything which is against India's interests. All India can tell Sri Lanka is, you should not do something for China which is against our interests or with China. But the China factor is not very big. As I said, China has made it very clear, if they are not going to get over involved. They are going to come in only with the IMF.
So only innocent intentions.
Not innocent intentions, they are not foolish.
Okay.
You see, if today if you go and pump money into Sri Lanka, there's no guarantee it will come back.
Right.
China cannot bring about political stability there. The Rajapakses, who were their friends, have fled. You don't know who's going to come to power. You don't know what his views and policies will be. So it's much better to step back, let the politics settle down, and whoever comes to power, ultimately China is a big, powerful country. China's economy is so strong that any country in the world will want good relations with China, will want to trade with China, will want Chinese companies to invest there. So they are confident about that. So it's nothing to do with innocence, but just pragmatism. Pragmatically, putting money blindly into Sri Lanka makes no sense. But coming in with the IMF, where the IMF comes with a package of reforms, whereby Sri Lankan economy will be nursed back to health. That is the need of the hour, and China will join that effort along with Western countries and along with India.
India may not be in the Lankan shoes, but there are some common symptoms. Which countries may go in the Sri Lankan way?
It is difficult to predict which country will go in the Sri Lankan way.
Especially in South Asia.
Yeah, but what has happened is both COVID and the war in Ukraine has hugely disturbed the international economy and is creating ripples and repercussions all over. In our neighborhood, Pakistan is a major crisis. Afghanistan under Taliban is under sanctions, and it's very difficult to do anything there. And if terrorism once again grows in Afghanistan and Pakistan, we have major concerns as a neighboring country. Similarly, Myanmar is under military dictatorship and again under international sanctions, struggling to get back onto its feet. And while Bhutan has always been relatively stable and prosperous, it's a tiny country, but Nepal has also witnessed huge amounts of political instability. Bangladesh has been a close friend. Our relations with Bangladesh are the best ever under Sheikh Hasina, but soon there will be elections in Bangladesh. And what government it brings and whether there is a clear majority all we will have to wait and see. So in general, all our countries in South Asia are importers of oil. And with the oil prices going sky high because of the war in Ukraine, we are all affected. Similarly, for many countries, India is self-sufficient in food. We have been exporting food grains. We have been providing food grains to the others. But many of our neighbors import food grains. And food grain prices again have gone sky high. All commodity prices have gone up. So this impacts people. So it is I mean, we are living in a difficult world, and our immediate environment is also very difficult. Even with regard to India, some people have argued that there is a silent fiscal crisis. People now talk about a global recession in the aftermath of the war in Ukraine and COVID. And the US has raised interest rates. And when the US raises interest rates, money which was in emerging market economies all flow back into the US, and the US dollar strengthens.
So what's happening here?
That's our rupee has been sinking, and money has been flowing out of the Indian stock markets. And for us also, while GST revenues have increased, overall our expenditure has also increased. So matching revenue to expenditure is always a difficult task for any finance minister and any government. We are much better off than most other countries because we have a big foreign currency chest. We have over the years accumulated foreign currency for an emergency. But still, we need to be extremely careful. We need to cut expenditure. We need to be careful. We gave a lot of tax incentives were given. So when we give tax incentives, we have to think twice. Always, like any household, reducing expenditure is far better than trying to take loans and spend more money. Governments tend to spend more money thinking spending money will bring economic growth. But for any reason, if economic growth doesn't happen, then you are saddled with a bigger debt burden and not adequate revenue and too high expenditure. So India needs to be very careful. We don't need to fear a crisis like Sri Lanka, but we need to manage our economy much better and very carefully.
There is a power vacuum in the southern neighborhood. Do you think this will open up the old ethnic wounds?
A power vacuum in our immediate neighborhood is always a matter of high concern. If there is a power vacuum, kind of protest, in no country is it nice to see people barging into the president's palace, into the prime minister's house, occupying it, the army and the police standing by and watching. That means there's a collapse of leadership. The army and police don't know who to obey or what to do. And anything can happen. They can be looting, they can be rioting. I think we can be thankful that so far no major violence has happened in Sri Lanka. But Sri Lanka has a long history. It has a history of the Tamil tigers and the extremists fighting for independence. It has a history of extremist Sinhala groups, Marxist Sinhala groups, Buddhist groups which were extremists, both rivalry between Sinhalese and Tamils as well as terrorism targeted at us. Rajiv Gandhi was killed by a Tamil terrorist ultimately. So political instability has huge consequences for us, which we must worry about. We must try and hope that there will be stability soon. The Indian government has said that we stand with the people of Sri Lanka, not any particular political party or leader. And India has to take that position, because if we are seen as proactive in deciding who will rule, then it will backfire on us. Then if somebody else comes to power, everybody will say he is India's candidate. Or if India's candidate doesn't come to power, whoever comes to power will say India tried to put somebody else as a candidate there, and now we will not be friends with India. So we have so much at stake that we need to be very cautious. We need to be very careful. We need to be very restrained. So that's why we are repeatedly saying we are with the people, but we will not get involved in domestic politics. Domestic politics solutions have to be found from within the country.
Can you expect such a great leader will emerge from Sri Lanka in near future? Can you expect it?
Well, once again, great leader is too much of an expectation, but a leader who brings stability and conducts negotiations with the IMF and implements the reforms that they suggest is the need of the hour.
The Premadasa family is coming back, the Sajith, and the Marxian leader Anura Dissanayake is uprising.
They are also getting active. So I know it's a very complex situation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed talking to you.